students are gone, but you are still here. And we know how you feel because you are done. But you have so much work to do to get ready for tomorrow. Good afternoon, podcast listeners everywhere. Welcome to After the Bell, a Stunt Brothers production. A podcast that gets inside the life of a teacher and provides a wellness guide for being prepared to take on this most challenging of professions. I'm Martin Stuvel.
And I'm Roy Hunt. And we share your pain, having taught a combined 70 years. The guarantee of this podcast is to make you laugh, make you think, and give you at least one little nugget that you can use in the classroom. So get out your marking, organize your supplies, or just pour yourself a coffee.
I want something stronger.
And listen, engage, and interact with After the Bell, a podcast for you, the hard-working, dedicated teacher who wants free lesson plans, free advice, and a free meal.
Okay, Roy, but I'm not paying for anything more than McDonald's. Hey, Roy, here we are.
Hey, Martin, here we are.
It's 22nd of December. We have 3 days till Christmas.
Wow.
How's that looking for you?
Pretty good. Well, I would like to say pretty good. Overall, I'm feeling pretty good, but I'm a little stressed because I really have some Christmas shopping
There's
to
always
do.
that last minute thing.
Yeah,
right?
last minute things. And
the malls are just like, ugh.
Yes. It was like, I don't like shopping at the best times.
No.
And then shopping for someone else gives me stress.
It is stressful.
And I understand why my grandparents, when I was a kid, would just give me money.
Much easier, right?
Get what you want. Get
Here's
what
20,
you want.
right?
Thanks,
Yeah.
Grandma. It's like, Grandma always gives money.
Always gets what I want because it's money, right? That's easiest, I know. But listeners, if you're listening to this, you should be on a break now. Mm-hmm. No matter what your profession, I hope you're going to have a break soon. But
Yes.
teachers are on their winter break.
Winter break.
And you are probably exhausted. Good chance you're
Probably exhausted.
You are
They
exhausted.
are exhausted.
You probably are fighting a cold. It just came on Saturday, right?
Yes.
The moment
Right.
your body relaxes a little bit, whoomp.
You say, I can't get sick. I can't get sick. I can't get sick. And then your body says, oh, you're slowing down. You're going to get sick.
Yeah.
It makes the decision for you.
It does, right?
Yes.
Knocked you off your feet while you got probably kids at home and other things to do. And
Yes.
maybe that will keep the stress up. So maybe you'll stay okay until, later, Boxing Day then. Maybe you'll be okay because that's when you'll try to relax. Christmas will be done. The turkey will have been eaten and the kids will hopefully be happy. And you'll be
Yes.
happy too.
And then you'll be even happier when you can send the kids out of the house.
Yes. So we are here just to wish you a Merry Christmas and the best of the season. This is one of our bonus episodes that we have.
Oh,
yeah, I know.
yes.
You get this is almost a Christmas gift.
Oh,
It's almost a Christmas
Nice.
gift because we package our field trip sessions when we go and interview guests, and we give you a 2-for-1.
yes, a twofer.
What a deal! I
Yes.
got 2 for you. So if you may have missed these episodes, we put 2 together. There you go. Episode 47 is one of those 2-for-1, and then episode 48, which will be after Christmas, will be another 2-for-1.
Nice.
Before we get back to our regular episodes, and we have a lot of fun stuff coming. We have guests galore. In
Yes,
January.
we do. We have a lot of field trips planned.
Yeah. We've had student teachers. We've had people that are experts on retirement. We have had Olympic athletes on. So that's coming in
Wow.
2026.
I feel like you did some stuff without me.
I think you were there.
Okay.
I think you were there.
Okay.
Yeah. So listeners, our 2-for-1 here is a episode that we had. It was a 2-parter, and it was incivility in the class.
Yes.
And we had these 2 separate interviews. We had Owen Howell.
And Steve Zlotnik?
Zlotnik. Yeah, Steve Zlotnik. Owen
Zlotnik.
Howell, yes.
Okay.
An elementary teacher and a secondary teacher, just talking about that low-level behavior that seems to be on the rise nowadays. We're not talking about extreme stuff, just little things that seem to trigger the class.
What do you think it was like up towards Christmas?
Yeah.
Did they just say like, oh, it's Christmas time. We're getting towards Christmas holidays. I'm going to dial it back. Do you think that happened?
No.
Or do you think it's
No.
sort of it
No.
was like that, but with
Another level.
4 cappuccinos?
Yeah, and just with,
Like,
with a Santa hat on. That's all.
Yes.
That's the only difference.
Yes.
Yeah. So here you are. Here's your 2-for-1, your bonus. chances are you may not even listen to these episodes, but they're just a chance to keep it going.
Oh, they have to listen to the episode.
Okay.
You don't give them a choice.
Well,
you know what?
But they may have heard this already.
It's a gift. If you're giving a gift, you say like,
no, I don't want this.
Appreciate the gift.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
Okay. So say thank you to the Stunt Brothers then for these holiday specials, these bonus episodes that will happen over the holidays before we get back to it in January with all those guests and other things that are going to come from the creative mind of Roy and Martin, otherwise known as the Stunt Brothers. So enjoy, everyone. There have been more and more talk in schools and in the media about an increase in rudeness of students in the classroom, what the academics call incivility. Research shows this to be not only a North American phenomena, but a worldwide phenomena. Something is going on. So we're sitting here with Owen Howell. He's a computer science and programming teacher at Carson Graham in North Vancouver, Canada. Owen has had a variety of assignments as an educator at secondary schools and knows firsthand what it's like to deal with today's teenagers.
We were listening to the CBC on the topic of rudeness in the classroom, and they talked of an increase in students vaping, walking out, sneaking time on the phone, and being quite defiant, and so on. What do you see in the classes that you teach?
It's an interesting question. Full disclosure, I moved from being a teacher of social studies, so mandatory classes, to being now a teacher of elective classes. So I find a little bit of a different kind of an approach playing out because students in my classes now, they're there because they've chosen to be there. It's not that they've been mandated to be there. I think maybe that plays out a little bit differently. But I found that generally students are quite appreciative of the class, of the opportunities they get. I don't get the walking out unbidden. That's something that I set out from the beginning of the year. As of this year, I don't even get any real problems with the cell phones because we've got a blanket approach across the province, which is that the cell phones are not allowed unless the teacher gives permission.
And how is that working out? Like, what's the actual practice of that?
Well, it does still come down to the teacher needs to enforce it, right? I am, at my school, getting a good amount of support from admin on this so that if it is becoming a problem for a particular student, we need to contact home first. And after that, then we can get the cell phone down to the admin. They can hold on to it. They can have the conversations with home as well. And then we also have conversations with the grade counselor. And so that has also been working out very well.
And you've noticed a positive change from before the ban?
Absolutely, I have. Yes, yeah. The ban did come in this year, so up until this year, it has really felt like I'm on the front lines and I'm kind of sitting there all alone because other classes they're allowed to use them or whatever. Not so much this year, and I've been able to enforce my rule, which is off and away unless I say. I find that it rhymes, and so therefore they can remember it, and that has tended to work well for me.
Do you think that's carrying over to their general use of cell phones? Because it was just waiting before the podcast, I was amazed. I saw no one on their cell phones, and they're obviously allowed to be on their cell phones at this time, but there was a lot of positive engagement going on, and maybe that was just a happy little view that was not representative of their non-school time. But is it carrying over, do you think?
There could be some carryover. I do see a lot of cell phone use outside of regular class hours, and I would expect to. A lot of times, particularly boys, before classes, they'll be sitting off in a corner of the corridor and they'll be playing a game. Often I find that they're playing a game together. Okay, so there'll be a 2 or a 3 or a 4 player game on their phones, and they're engaged together even if they're on their phone. So that, I suppose, it's not as bad as just being engaged in the phone yourself
like
and seeing everything
social
else. There is a social aspect to it, I think. Yeah. So I guess going back to is it playing out mostly in positive when it comes out of the classroom? I'm guessing so. I think so. I think it was a happy moment that you saw because you saw that there wasn't much use of the cell phone. I do see a lot of times when kids will be on the cell phone and walking down the corridor, and I'm surprised they don't run into anything or hurt themselves, right? But that is, again, it's outside the classroom, and it's beyond my authority to be able to do any control over.
Do you think students were more engaged in school earlier in your career than they are now?
When you're asking earlier in my career, I think a dividing line is the dark days of the lockdown, right? It's March through June of 2020. I've said to anyone who will listen that was the lowest point in my entire career. And if I had to go back to doing that again, I'd probably take early retirement. And so prior to that, I had been a lot more doing social studies and now a lot more doing the programming and computer science. So there are two elements to that. Were they engaged? They were engaged when it was something that they were really interested in the social studies curriculum or the law curriculum or history curriculum. Then I could see them being engaged. But I do recall, it may be coloring, through the dusts of time. It may be coloring my view, but I do recall looking out and seeing a classroom full of, the eyes are open, but no one's answering the door. So the lights are on, but no one's answering the door. And I could remember feeling that a lot more in a social studies class than I do in my classes now. So I guess that is prior to COVID and then since COVID.
And just for listeners, because CBC did go on about the time of the pandemic being a real turning point in terms of kids losing engagement. Now, refresh my memory, in North Vancouver, unlike Ontario where I think kids were out much longer, what was the actual pandemic schedule for students? There was the first part where they were all at home, but then was it a bit of a hybrid model?
It was definitely a hybrid model. For the year following, we refer to it the lockdown, right? The start of the next school year, grade 8s were in school full-time, but grade 9 through 12, they were hybrid. So they would be there half the class would be there every other day. And so I would teach the students who were in the room and then essentially repeat that lesson for the next group of students who are in the room. And at the same time, I would have them working on some things at home when they're working remotely, right? And extensive use of Teams and that kind of thing in order to get that information out.
Were there effects from that time, that hybrid time, that you saw more when kids were back full-time and it's kind of lessened over the last couple years in terms of the impact of them being online so much or being at home when we first got back and there was no more hybrid system? Maybe you saw changes that dramatically altered their civility or their interaction with each other, and has it lessened since that time? Do you understand what I mean?
I do understand what you mean. Not really noticed so much as a change in their civility, but certainly their expectations of me as a teacher, of what they can expect to be given to them, that has changed. The expectation that we're always on, and that therefore they can message me at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and okay, I can't find this on the team. Where am I looking? And can you give me a tutorial now on this? I've seen that a lot more. And I suppose there is an element of civility in that too, of, look, when I was in high school, I fully expected that my teachers would be available to me while at school, or if I went to a tutorial or a help session, they'd be available for me there. But I certainly wasn't expecting that they would be available to me all of the time.
And do you find parents are also expecting you to be available all of the time, right? There's probably a change there as well.
There is somewhat of a change. When they're reaching out, I don't know that they're necessarily expecting that I'm going to be answering right away, but I get the impression that if I put that out there, then I'm expecting an answer sooner.
Yeah. And I think we sometimes make the mistake of answering right away, and it's 12 at night, and then they think that's you're 24/7, right?
That's
so
right.
We have to be careful.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So, what are some examples that you see in terms of rudeness or incivility that you get in the classroom?
In preparation for today, I have actually asked some of my colleagues, and
yes,
so
that's good.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I have, or that others, my colleagues have encountered, has been just I suppose one could call it a disengagement. It's waiting for the material to be delivered to me, the student, and I'm going to put less effort into gleaning that information, right? So we don't use textbooks so much anymore because the textbooks aren't available or they're not updated or whatever. And so, okay, I'm going to wait till the teacher gives me the notes package or the notes where I have to fill in the blanks or the package that I need to study from before I do anything. So that's maybe something that has been encountered. As far as civility in the classroom for myself. The cell phones are no longer so much of an issue. I do still find that the evidence of incivility comes in the students having a conversation on their own or interrupting me as I'm trying to present to an entire class, right? So as a computer teacher, what I will do is I will give a demonstration for the entire class and then go around and help individuals, right? If I'm halfway through a demonstration and I get a hand go up and says, "Can I go to the washroom now?" That drives me crazy, right? Yeah. Or else, I'm halfway through it. They need to know this part. I know they need to know this part. They even know they need to know this part. And then I see, the kids whispering in the back, and then, okay, I've got to do something, right? So that I've seen. I don't know that that's more since the dark days of COVID, or whether that's on the increase or not. I don't have any kind of a definitive data to say that for myself. I just know that's frustrating, and it continues, right?
And this one teacher who talked on the CBC broadcast talked about an increase with incivility between students, saying students themselves have noticed that just some of the offhand comments they say to each other are more blunt, more rude, more things you tend to see online and places like that where you're anonymous, but now people are saying it to people's faces. At school, they say it's getting worse. It's not based in any general study. It was just anecdotal. What do you think about that?
I've seen evidence that supports that, actually. We've had, in staff meetings and member meetings, we had discussions around concerns over increasing instances of misogynistic comments, of generally rude comments, or the "I have an opinion, so I must be right and you're an idiot" kind of a comment. We really saw it come out when Andrew Tate was gaining popularity, and there were some really uncomfortable instances that I can remember of just misogyny to where I wouldn't have expected to see it, and it being right in front of me. So, okay, do you think I'm not going to deal with this now? Right. But that it should be so open, it was kind of surprising to me.
Do you think that some cases of incivility occur due to a lack of skills or confidence in a student?
Yes, I can see that. A part of our job as teacher is we're not just teaching the curriculum, we're teaching all of those skills as well. I own that. I take that on. We're teaching social skills. We're teaching communication skills. We're teaching how do you relate to those people around you in a way that's going to be productive and helpful and respectful. So I take that on myself, and I think we all should, of course. But do I see that there are challenges with that? Absolutely. It's grist for the mill for us as teachers, of course.
But it sounds like teachers are not just throwing up their hands and saying, "I can't do anything about this." They realize it's an issue, as so many things come into the classroom, and they are dealing with it in their way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely we deal with it. And it's, I see it as an expectation for all of us as adults, whether we're a teacher, whether we're a parent, whether we're a coach, whoever we are. It's learning is not something that just happens in the four walls of a classroom, right? But where I take it on is in how I present myself as an example of what I think civility should be. So what I think should be the interactions that a responsible, kind adult should have with each other. Yeah. So,
what collectively have you done as teachers and as staff to work with students with incivility?
One of the approaches that we have taken has been and it isn't like limited to incivility or teaching civility, teaching social skills. It's been around noticing any positive behaviors that students have or performance behaviors that students have where we notice something and we call attention to the positive thing. So it's the positive reinforcement rather than saying, "Oh, you should not have done that." Right. That's not going to be helpful to anyone because the student who gets that is going to shut down. But noticing and nurturing and identifying the positive interactions and then modeling positive interaction as well, right? An example where I have sometimes seen incivility is with interruptions. For example, if I'm seeing a conversation happening during a demonstration where I need them to be listening, but they aren't, I'll stop and I'll just wait. So it's not an issue of an attack, it's an issue of respecting a conversation that happens. Often they will realize, oh yeah, he stopped talking and this is the reason for it, right? And it's because he's waiting for me to stop, when really I shouldn't have started to begin with. So I'm not calling them on it. I'm just allowing them to recognize it.
And that Roy and I both listened to this podcast called It's Hidden Brain, and they had an episode called How Rude with the podcast host is Shankar Vedantam. And it was the effects of incivility on society. And they talked about how there are kind of downstream effects of incivility. And that's the problem with the classrooms. We often are just a microcosm of the greater society, right? And there are effects, and people talk about it, whether it's online, whether it's waiting in the grocery store and having someone, be rude to the checkout person. Do you see the need for, instead of us always going to the classroom and saying, let's solve the problem here, that there's also things out in the greater society and things and changes that need to happen there as well, rather than put it all on the school?
Oh, please, yes. Don't put it all in the classroom. None of us can solve the world's problems just from the classroom. It is a place, certainly. But as I say, it is the burden of teachers, the burden of administrators, the burden of coaches, the burden of parents, right? It is on all of us to model appropriate behavior and to nurture the positive interactions so that children can see what a positive interaction looks like, and then hopefully that is taken up.
So how do schools and how do teachers involve parents to deal with incivility in a way that is constructive?
How do schools
and parent communities?
And are they aware?
Are parents aware of it?
I don't know. That's an interesting question. I don't know whether parents are aware of it in the same way that we as teachers or the school system is aware of it, because, let's be honest, the child acts differently at home than they do at school. I can see this not only for the students in front of me, but my own children.
My own children too. Yes,
we both know exactly. Yeah,
absolutely. And yeah. So it's curious because I've observed my own kids. I have 3 kids. I've observed them all in their friend group. I've observed them all in different kinds of circumstances where they weren't even necessarily sure that I was observing them. So, they're almost a different person. So are they aware of what we're facing or vice versa? I'm not entirely sure.
What can we do to bring parents into the conversation, do you think?
Wow, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very limited scope, but when we have, for example, parent-teacher interviews or learning conferences, I think they call them now, the tradition at high school has always been the parents come in, but the student doesn't. But to have it more of a conversation and allow there to be the conversation around behavior and deportment and the tone in the classroom and all those kinds of things, I think that would be a positive way to do that.
I always found it worked best when the student was there, just because you know how it is. The parents go, "That's not. They're not that at home. What are you talking about, right?" And they play one against the other. But if the child's sitting there, it's much easier to get to the heart of it.
Absolutely,
call them on things. Yeah.
It does happen on occasion where we will get the students come in. I find sometimes it's the case where the student needs to come in to translate for the parents, that brings in another level of
what are they actually saying?
Yeah, exactly. Really, because that's not the tone of our expression on his face. It does happen where occasionally the student will come in with the parents, and that's a golden time, right?
Yeah.
And then that conversation is very fulsome, but also quite different than if the parent is coming in on their own. Right. Certainly.
So what do you worry about if we don't see some changes? I mean, the positive is during this interview, cell phones are out of the pictures at school, so that is a positive. Mm-hmm. But do you have some worries about what would happen if we don't see changes?
Well, all we need to do is look at the popular discourse, right? I was about to say, look at the leadership south of the border and all of the support he got.
Yeah.
That's worrisome, right? So, yeah, I can see similar attitudes coming here at times, not attempting to be apolitical, but I'm able to see some of those concerns here. Mm-hmm. And that discourse is not just on the political level. There's a social knock-on effect of that, as I said earlier, the approach that, well, I have an opinion, I must be right because it's my opinion, and you're an idiot because you didn't accept my opinion. I've seen that, certainly. And, that not in the classroom per se, but I mean, that is part of the social discourse. The danger is that if we don't address incivility, if we don't address proper social skills, that becomes worse and worse, and that it manifests itself in more negative reactions from generally in society with a knock-on effect going down 10 years, 20 years, 30 years.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Owen, we both appreciate you taking this time. Both Roy and I have known you for quite a long time, and we know you have a fantastic reputation in this district, and it's just wonderful to hear your perspective, and it's a valid perspective, and it's a genuine understanding of the issue, and we know what a wonderful teacher you are in North Vancouver, so thanks for this.
Thank you.
I'm happy to be here in the sense that I'm an elementary school teacher, and the lens that I have is quite different than the lens that you have, and I'd love hearing your perspective.
Wonderful. Thank you. It's been an honor to speak with you.
Thank you. Thanks, Owen.
Thank you.
We're sitting here with Steve Zlotnik, an intermediate teacher at Mount Royal Elementary in North Vancouver. Thank you, Steve, for being on our podcast After the Bell. It's wonderful to have you. So listeners know, worked with Steve for several years in the School of Mount Royal, and we also served on the executive of the NVTA, the North Vancouver Teachers Association, which is the local union, for many years. So I've known you for a while.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, Martin, and with you, Roy, and I'm excited to get into this.
So let's get into the meat of this topic of incivility. And you've taught for how long, Steve?
About 24 years.
Okay, yeah, and before that, I think you taught in England as well?
I've taught in England, and I taught in northern British Columbia on a First Nations reserve.
Yeah.
And I worked in Mozambique. Not teaching, but I was working in development aid overseas.
So a wealth of experience, Mr. Zlotnik. And looking back, let's just go back 10 years, for example, but you can go further back in your career. Have you seen a change in the rudeness of the incivility of students in the class in terms of those low-level behaviors? Are they on the rise, or is it just some of us are getting old and we go, that's the way it's always been, we're just less tolerant? What do you think?
That's a good question. I think it is different. There's the low-lying behaviors that every teacher will have experienced, whether they taught 40 years ago or today. But I do think that the intensity and the volume of the behaviors has become more pervasive, and it's creating challenges in many classrooms just for getting kids to be their best version of themselves. So I think it has become an issue, and I don't think it's just that we are tired, because I feel blessed every day that I get to teach children and bring out the best and support them and have fun with them and get to play in my job. It's one of the best parts of my job. But I would say that these challenges and the incivility, it doesn't create sort of a learning culture that makes it makes learning challenging.
Mm-hmm. Could you give us some examples of incivility that you see commonly in the classroom?
Some of the ones you mentioned in the intro, I think, are very much the common ones we see. So some of them would be not paying attention. That one's common. I think there was some study I remember hearing about years ago that the typical attention span, I think not just of children but adults, is about 7 seconds, and and sometimes that feels generous. So I think as a teacher, I think getting kids' attention, it's not a matter of conveying information. It's really about having like a hook. When I grew up through in teacher education, we talked about having a hook and grabbing their attention. But increasingly, I've found that maintaining their attention is a challenge, because I think for so many of them, they're used to instant gratification. So whether that's through technology and getting some sort of dopamine release from playing a video game or going on social media or just sort of doom scrolling YouTube, they're used to getting some sort of reaction from that. So that's, I think, one part is the technology. And then the other part is not waiting. I think this is one part I've seen in the classroom a lot, is the inability to wait, or unwillingness to wait. Growing up, both of my parents are teachers, and my mother was a grade 1 teacher, and we would play bellhop. So when we had made a mess, we would have to clean up, and we would be running around returning the toys or the items to where they were supposed to be. But we would also even practice waiting, where we would have to wait. And we would practice where we would have a question, we would come up to my mother, and she wouldn't answer it. We would wait till she sort of acknowledged our presence, and then we would go. So we practiced waiting. It was something that we just thought that was normal. But I think increasingly children are curious. Children have always been curious, but I think increasingly they're wanting a response right away. And if they don't get it, they will just keep repeating it. And I think as a classroom teacher, when we're trying to have a culture which is about curiosity and inquiry, which is great, but now we have 25 to 30 diverse individuals in the classroom, having a place where we can make it coherent and work is being kind of overrun by the need for instant gratification, an answer. Even if you just said that answer, even if you've explained it or it's being wrapped up in a great hands-on lesson, it's still, for many students, I think they're struggling with the need to have instant reaction and almost sort of a hand-holding through the activity.
I think when you talked about the waiting part, I think you're onto something, because I think of just kids out in the general community, at the grocery store, other times. When I was young, you just had to go along and wait. I think my own kids learned they had to wait, and it was sometimes a really boring hour or two that you were out there, and maybe they're not having to wait, right? Instantly, if they want attention, the parent gives it the attention, right?
I think that's exactly right. I actually did a lesson a couple of years ago, I've done it a few times, on waiting and not getting instant reaction, because I think the world that I grew up in and that you grew up in is so different from what we're experiencing now. So if I wanted concert tickets as a teenager, I had to go down to Capilano Mall, I had to line up, I had to be prepared. When I wanted to watch a program, even before the VCR was invented, I had to plan my time accordingly. So even as a child, I had to organize myself. I even think when I went to Handsworth Secondary School, when I was in grade 8, the whole school was pulled out onto the side field. And our principal at the time was very direct at telling people how disappointed he was. This is because some of the grade 12 students had decided to flush all the toilets at the same time. And so you think of that act of vandalism. It didn't work in the end. And I wasn't sure what had happened, but I was very curious because there was very strong emotions at the time. And there's 1,200 kids of us all pulled out to the side gravel field at Handsworth at the time. But I think of that act of vandalism, which required organization, planning, getting watches all synchronized, sneaking out of class, and then having the audacity to do it. And so even that, which was not a productive enterprise, but that required advanced planning. So I think getting back to the waiting and planning, I think that's harder. It's slower, and it doesn't give the instant feedback. There was a study, I think, a number of years ago, I think out of Stanford, that talked about the brain, different parts of the brain being activated by reading the same thing, but reading it in the form of a book and reading it on some sort of e-reader or iPad. And I think that gets to how we consume media, myself included. So much of it is in a digital form. And
they've done studies, I think, even at university, where kids who still take notes by hand can retain the information much better than even those that they might be typing it verbatim.
Yeah.
But they're not taking it in at all, right?
That's exactly
so I think you're really onto something that's going on that has having an impact, and you're seeing it firsthand in the classroom.
Absolutely. And I think the challenge as a teacher is I'm regularly treated like a human sort of Google. I'm like, they want answers, and I'm able to give them answers. But the question is not whether I can, it's whether I should. And I think that's, I'd say in the last 10 years, how my job has changed. I've always tried to give them the tools to think, but I think now I'm quite, resistant's the word, but I'm a bit resistant to giving them what they want right away. Mm-hmm. I'm much more focused on giving them the tools, but that involves discomfort, because what they're really wanting is not what's going to be helpful for them, both short-term or long-term. And I'm trying to give them the tools, sort of how to fish, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And I do think, the kids are fantastic. I love what I do. I love working with the kids. But I do think I'm trying to build in this sort of anti-fragility, this ability to sort of do something that's uncomfortable, challenging, in search of getting something so they can become more independent and be the person they want to be.
How do you think individual student incivility affects the learning of the other students in the class?
I don't think there's any impact on any of the other students in the class. No impact whatsoever.
Next question.
As a matter of fact, it has a modest, it has a pervasive effect. Yeah. And that's, I think, the great challenge as classroom teachers, to be able to recognize this, deal with it, but also do so in sort of a positive learning culture, because it would be easy to become overwhelmed and frustrated or jaded. It has an impact. One of the ways I've noticed is through noise. So over the years, I've tried different strategies in the classroom. We teach manners and how to interact with others. However, some of the solutions have included, I think we had some cardboard to sort of dampen sound. We have noise-canceling headphones these days, which are very popular. Mm-hmm. We have carols and the old-style carol and some dividers from an election to give some visual sort of separation between students. And I think that's often what students need. I think they're so overstimulated that they need almost an antithesis to that to be able to kind of focus and relax. One activity we do regularly is drawing or do some art. And what I find is when kids have to engage, they really have to concentrate on an activity, they're more engaged, but two, they're much quieter.
Don't you find they also afterwards thank you for it?
Oh.
They realize, wow, I didn't know my brain could be this calm.
That's right. Yeah. There's a piece to it. And for all the talk of, mental health, I think sometimes being not just busy, but being engaged is so positive. Another thing we do is handwriting. I get the kids to practice cursive, and it's not because this is the way of the future, but I think just having the confidence to be able to write their name and actually to concentrate, because it's not something that comes naturally. I learned it when I was in the 3rd grade, and it was something we practiced, and I'm grateful. And I don't have to practice it a lot, but I know how to do it. And I think for kids, giving them the confidence to acquire a skill, whether it's drawing or listening or handwriting or whatever, or some athletic pursuit, whatever it is, I think it's great for the confidence, but it also gives them, I think, that kind of inner peace to just be content with doing the thing. They don't need a parent or a teacher to kind of bail them out, but rather they can be engaged in the activity that they're taking part in and be sort of fully present.
It sounds like you've really thought about this in terms of how do you address it now, right? Like, I don't get the sense you're just throwing your hands up in the air and going, nothing I can do, right? I mean, you're dealing with the reality of 2025.
Sure.
Do you feel it contains it and it is making a difference, or do you still feel you get yourself quite frustrated sometimes, or even a general feeling for what other teachers have told you too, right? What do you think?
When I talk to teachers, I know teachers all around the Lower Mainland and through BC and even internationally, and it's a version of the same story. I think with sort of the incivility and the lack of attention. I don't get frustrated, but I think I guess I'm always curious to find out, like, do our classrooms and does our current system work? Mm-hmm. And I would say it doesn't. We're operating on a different model, and that's no criticism of the people who are in it, because some of my colleagues I've worked for nearly a quarter century, I'm so amazed and impressed, and so have the deepest respect for how they teach. It's a challenging profession in the best of times, and to be able to do it with humor and I think with skill and patience is a challenge. In terms of solutions, I think the model of having 25 to 30 diverse individuals in one spot for 5 to 6 hours a day, I don't think it's working. And I think it could work with more flexibility around staffing if we had different people who we could take smaller groups, because ultimately I think this job's about connection and kids being connected. And I think that's where it's kind of got lost. We have kids, and then of course we put a huge amount of effort into developing and maintaining those relationships. But I just think the numbers game where you're putting out fires constantly, it does not work to be able to create the conditions where all the children will feel both safe, secure, calm, because those behaviors are becoming so pervasive, they impede that. So what that might look like would be the ability to take kids and do certain activities. For example, if you could have a cooking class where groups of maybe 6 would be able to go out for a time. And this isn't a thing about excluding some kids, but rather rotating kids and having diverse groups of kids being able to have a break. And I think that's what kids need. They need that ability to play and to have hands-on learning. But just the nature of the sheer number and the intensity of the behaviors makes the classroom sort of this pressure cooker that if you don't let the pressure release, like we were fortunate to be, we're looking out onto the creek behind my classroom, and it's so great that we have the natural environment here. And working with Martin, we would often take our kids outside and play, and that's a great way. So sometimes it doesn't have to be fancy, and it can be a whole class activity, but I think having the flexibility to have different groups and different pairings, and not just within the class, but even within the school, because sometimes there's maybe not a big peer group in the classroom, and you need to kind of give more opportunities.
Yeah, and I guess, society's changed so much, but you could walk into a class today and then go in a time machine back to 1950, and the style would be different, of course, but it's still the same way, really, right? We haven't really adapted and changed all these other things we want education to be.
That's right.
Yeah. Do you think parents are aware of the forms of incivility that are in the classroom?
I think they're somewhat aware, but I believe parenting styles have changed. And I don't think there's a one right or wrong style, but I do think as a basic I think children need boundaries. And I think when we have some of these behaviors, often there's very intense feelings by the children or by the parents as well. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important that we acknowledge those feelings, but we don't necessarily limit what the children can do based on those feelings. So it might sound a bit cold, but I do think we can acknowledge that the children are upset, but it may be that they're just not comfortable with something. And if we can provide a safe environment for them to grow, they will. So in terms of the parents, I think sometimes what makes our job harder is parents reacting to students. I've seen it in person, but right away. So we were just talking about waiting a few minutes ago. So when children have to wait, so if they're playing on the playground or they're out in the community, if a child has a question, sometimes the parents need to ignore them or let them know that they'll be with them soon and build in that waiting time. If that could be supported at home, I think it would make our job a lot easier, because the children would know that we're not trying to be rude or cruel to the children, but rather we are dealing with something in an order, in the best way we can. And sometimes that means waiting.
Part of the inspiration for this podcast was when I listened to Matt Galloway's CBC program, The Current, and the academics there talked about how they think part of the issue is the fact that students of all ages don't get together as much in groups after school and before school and on weekend. In your experience and hearing the students talk, do you find that they are spending less time together?
I think there's two parts. One is organized activities. So when I grew up, summers seemed to take forever because I might go to a summer camp for a week, but I wouldn't be entertained for the 8 or 9 weeks that were our summer. I would entertain myself. I'd actually go up not far from here above the power lines and take a peanut butter sandwich and go with my Archie comics and go for hours into the woods, right into bear country, and just with no phone or anything, just go in the woods and play for hours. Yeah. And I learned, I think, to entertain myself. And so I think one part of it is the ability to entertain oneself and not look to the parent or to the teacher to solve it. So I think that's one part. The other part is there's a huge benefit to playing in team activities, whether it could be a team sport, it could be part of a band. There's all sorts of activities, but it needs to be where you are both reliant on others and have to interact with others. And I think a lot of the rudeness and incivility part of it is a lack of practice. I had 3 sisters, so I was able to. Siblings are a great.
You learn the hard way, right?
From the School of Hard Knocks.
Yes.
It was not too bad. I had 3 older sisters, so in the 70s, so it was not too hard for me. But you do learn very quickly when you act a certain way that certain behaviors are either tolerated or not tolerated or appreciated or not appreciated. So I think we do that in the classroom every day, but I do think having the opportunity to practice those skills will give kids the confidence to interact with others that will give them the skills to be successful, not only academically, but also socially and emotionally as well.
Yeah. I found it was rare when they actually said they were going to have a play date or something after school, right? They would say, I'll meet you on, what's the big grade 4 or 5 online game they like to play?
Fortnite?
fortnight, right? I'll see you there, and that's where they interacted.
Yeah.
And I'm sure some of it isn't so bad because they probably had some connections.
Sure, there's a lot of teamwork and a lot of benefits,
for sure. So
but I
don't
think
discount it.
I don't think it replaces the in-person civility. And I think that's when they look, I know some Jonathan Haight's work has looked at how people interact with each other virtually or in a digital world versus in person. And it's unequivocal. Like we are much kinder.
You can be rude out there. Look at the online world. Look at Twitter and all those places and how it's going on as we speak, right? Yeah.
And I think when you see the whites of people's eyes and you have to interact with them and realize this is an actual person, it's not a word, it's not me winning or owning somebody, that changes it. And that's the empathy and patience has to be practiced. And traditionally, I think it was because we were in an in-person world. But as we move to a digital world and as kids haven't had the opportunities, either with siblings or with friends, they've gotten more out of practice.
They're born into this now, right?
This is the new world. And that's, I guess, my hope that we could have opportunities for them in the classroom that are not the traditional four walls. But we can expand it. But to do that, we need sort of the resources and tools to teach kids in the world that we live in right now.
Right. So, what worries do you have if we don't take care of this incivility in the classrooms? What do you see as a possibility? Go big.
Yeah.
Well, as we speak, there's many challenges going on in the world today, and I think it all stems. I'm simplifying, but a large part of it stems from a lack of understanding and empathy of both your friend or foe and neighbor. And I think we have to both be understanding, but also have a firm resolve that this is something that we stand for. My mother used to have a saying, she would say, on matters of importance, or matters that are not important, bend like a reed, and on matters of, true importance, be like a rock.
I like that.
And I think it's that wisdom, and I think there's a lot of talk about being understanding and being empathetic, and I think we should be that way. But I think that can sometimes give cover on things of true importance, of basic respect and decency and kindness and love, to be more amenable than we should. We should be, I think, unwavering on this commitment to true diversity and kindness and respect for our fellow person, whether it's in a classroom or someone halfway around the world. But I do think that requires having some sort of belief system. My father taught in the Department of Education, the education faculty, I should say, at UBC, and he taught a course called Education Studies 314, which was all about teachers developing a philosophy of education. And one of the great things about our profession, I think, is you can teach in many different ways. There's no one right teacher or one right philosophy, but I think it has to be consistent with your values. So I think as teachers, we have this amazing role and responsibility to have a philosophy that's based on our background, our history, our strengths, and our challenges, but also to be open to developing and learning as we go. And I think if we can have that, I think we'll be more successful, not just in the classroom, but as we look to the greater world and all the challenges we're facing there. I think that gives you the flexibility to, like I said with my mother saying, to bend like a reed on something that's not really important. There's a lot of schadenfreude and a lot of concern with what others are doing, but I think that doesn't help us. And then on true things of true importance or national significance, we can stand tall.
No, Steve, you know as well as I do in this career, whenever there's a problem in the greater society, they look at the teacher and say, solve it, right?
Sure.
So what would you say to parents? What could they do?
It's the old saying, it takes a village. If someone looks to school as the cure or the fix-all, I think that's what's happened. And I think if you look just in terms of what we're expected to teach over the last 25 years, it has grown exponentially. And I think there is a role for what we teach to fully represent the complete child, not just academics, but certainly emotionally and socially. Those are really important components of developing a full person. But we cannot stand alone. This is not something that we can do. We need to. It's very much like we need certainly three parts. We need the parent, we need the child, and we need the teacher to all be engaged. And we can do more, and we frequently have done more. but I don't think it works when the other parts of the stool are not balanced. And I think the equation, the relationship is not balanced at this time, which is, I think, why there's so much burnout with teachers and people who love this profession and train for years for this profession and have spent many, often decades in the profession, are just reaching a point where they say, I can't go on.
Do you find for the most part that when you do tell parents you're dealing with rudeness in the class and the way you're dealing with it, that they are supportive of you?
As a general, I would say so. I think maybe learning over time, it's less of a, your child did this, we can share it, but it's always coming back to, this is a way, here's sort of what happened, and here's sort of a way we can move forward positively. So in general, I would say they're supportive. I think a lot of the behaviors, though, stem from relatively low-level things. Like I mentioned before, it's telling your child they have to wait. It's not letting them play video games on maybe on a weekday. It's doing something that will make it uncomfortable for them, that's going to force them to learn. And I think that level of being comfortable with discomfort, it needs to be supported at home. And if it is, I think our job not just becomes easier, it actually we're much more productive, and we can engage children because they're used to that give and take of, it's your turn, you'll have to wait, versus I want it now.
So, Steve, I want to thank you very much for allowing us to take a deep dive into this topic. I think it's something that affects everyone, teacher, student, and everyone part of the greater society. And I think we all have a desire that we deal with this at every level we can and every way we can, so that we have this civil society that we're all proud of. And we're not just in our little bubbles attacking each other, which sadly looks like it is the way it is now. But you always have to have hope, right?
You always have to have hope. I agree.
Always hope. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
That was a really good interview with Steve. I really loved the points that he brought up. I think it's different from when I was in the classroom. I know I've only retired since June.
Yes.
But things have changed,
they really have. And you got to the heart of some of the executive functioning areas that are lacking skills and need certainly further support.
It's interesting because when I look at that span of time that we have taught, and then seeing how things are right now, that there's definitely been a change, and COVID didn't help.
No, it didn't help. But whether it's the cause, I don't know. And that's what we're trying to filter through here, right? And things have changed. And it was just good to hear Owen's perspective last week, a secondary teacher, and Steve's perspective this week, which is an elementary perspective. But, Mr. Hunt, that's only two perspectives, right?
So it'd be really great. We have listeners from all over the world.
We do now. Yes.
I know that this was our perspective, or the interviews took place here in British Columbia and North Vancouver, but it's just not a Canadian problem.
No, I've heard it's happening, if you do studies, Australia, England, Europe, all places around the world are experiencing a similar decline in incivility.
So I would love to hear about people from other parts of the world. I'd love for them to share on our website the things that they have experienced in their classrooms.
Yeah, and if your experience is different from what you heard, they are just two perspectives, right? Yes. We want to hear from that. So stuntbrothers.ca is our webpage. And on the homework board, we have a place where you can add your comments and give us your feedback. And we would be happy to see that. And if you want to have us share it on the air, we certainly will do that too. And maybe you'd like to come on as a guest and hear your perspective. So you can always contact us on the contact page. And there's a link there on our webpage, stuntbrothers.ca.
That's stuntbrothers.ca.
This podcast is organic, taking shape with each episode. Building resiliency for teachers everywhere.
That sounds great.
And our website is stuntbrothers.ca.
That's stuntbrothers.ca.
We will chat again
after the bell.